What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So today we're going to take a look at a version of Zelda Breath of the Wild that's been done on PC through an emulator that it looks weird. It's a modification that's kind of changed up the look a bit and removed some textures and visuals and everything. And it kind of shows what Breath of the Wild looks like completely, like environments and everything without the cell shading. So we'll take a look at that one. And then we also have to look at Artifact, which is Valve's newest game that is it's just in trouble. It's not a good situation over there. We're going to go over all of that and more today. As always, guys, enjoy these videos. Hit the like button. It really helps out. We're going to start today with RPG Maker. Now, we know there is one that's released in Japan, and now it's coming out this year in everywhere else, pretty much, in the US and everything. And it looks like it's actually been canceled for the Xbox, which is odd, but apparently this comes down to several different circumstances that were just impossible to, I guess, figure out. And I'm not really sure why that's the case with one system like the Xbox, unless they just thought it just wouldn't sell on the Xbox. It's the only thing that I could think of. I mean, it's coming out on the Switch, and it's coming out on the PlayStation 4. We're going to talk a bit more about that later on in the Nice America showcase. We'll go over that in a bit more detail, but I don't really know why it's been canceled for the Xbox, but it has, and it was just announced yesterday, and we're expecting it to be coming out sometime this year. Very weird, though, so if you're looking, I guess, to get on the Xbox, you'll have to move to a different system that it's coming out on. Also, if you're someone who can't stand Mr. X in Resident Evil 2, the remake, well, there's actually a mod on the PC that will just remove him completely, and that way you don't feel like you're getting pushed through certain parts of the game. I actually like Mr. X in Resident Evil. I think he presents, I guess, just a sense of you gotta move, because he's gonna get you and he's gonna clothesline you and beat you up and everything. And of course, people have played around with Mr. X a lot, whether turning him into Thomas the Tank Engine or just removing his clothes or dressing him up in different outfits. And I understand why people don't like they don't like feeling like they have to move and they have to get out of the way, and you can't take your time and look around the environments, because there are parts in the game where maybe you do want to do some more exploration, but Mr. X is like right behind you. I just think he adds this sense of uneasiness when you're playing, because you can hear his footsteps and everything, and it'll just bust through like a door after you. It's pretty fun to have him in there, but this modification will just completely remove him, and it actually works around some of the cutscenes, because you do need Mr. X for some of the cutscenes that take place. Those cutscenes will still happen without any issues, so you really don't miss anything other than Mr. X himself coming after you. So for some people who want him gone, you can just install it on the PC and play the game without him, but I do think you missed something. Now, of course, we at least believe that Resident Evil 3, based on what some of the developers and people are saying, that is being remade right now, kind of in the same sense of Resident Evil 2, and if you don't like Mr. X, you are not at all gonna like Nemesis, because he does the same thing, but he's faster, and he has a rocket launcher. Also, check this out. This is actually Pod Racer in Unreal Engine 4. Now, if you don't know what Pod Racer is, it was actually a game that was released on the Nintendo 64 before Star Wars went to EA and they wanted to do everything service-based and all of that. No, we had weird games back then, like racing around a track on a pod racer, because that was pretty big back on episode 1, but this is actually a full remake of it that a fan made in Unreal Engine 4 that you can see. It actually runs really well. It was done by Blue Drake 42, at least made a video about it, and I believe they even had a download link to it, and I can tell you now, this is probably going to be ripped down by Disney at some point, because, of course, it's using the Star Wars IP and assets and ideas and everything from it, and they're pretty strict about that, so you might want to go check it out before that gets pretty much dealt with, I would say. But Pod Racer was a really cool game back then. It's just, we don't get those kind of games anymore. We get Battlefront, and we get Battlefront, right? That's kind of it, and that hasn't worked out well at all since its inception, the new ones. Back with Battlefront 1 and then 2 on like the Xbox and the PS2, those are really good, but the new ones now are, they're not. So here we go with Jedi Fallen Order, and maybe they'll get something good there. But I look at these remakes, and it's really cool to see them being remade in Unreal Engine 4, but it also makes me a bit sad with the Star Wars games we have now. A bit nostalgic for the old days when everyone, Factor 5, for example, was making Rogue Squadron and stuff, and we had Jedi Outcast, and there was stuff everywhere. Obi-Wan on the original Xbox, and it was a good time back then to be a Star Wars fan, and now it's kind of not when it comes to video games. All right, guys, some quick news out of the way. Let's get into the bigger stuff. We're going to start with NIS America because they had a full showcase and talked about a lot of games. Now, we're going to go over all of them that they released in a full press release and a breakdown and everything. We're going to go through them kind of quick because there is a lot. I mean, there's a lot of games. So we're going to go through them and show you guys some trailers as we go here as well. And we're going to get started with Trails of Cold Steel 3. That's actually coming in fall of 2019 for the PlayStation 4. Keep in mind, they're actually not going to have a Vita or PC release at this time that they announced, so keep that in mind. And if they're not going to have a Vita release, I assume they would want to move it to the Switch for the handheld nature, but we'll see. I don't know. Falcom's been kind of weird about Switch releases, and I would at least think they would go to the PC at some point. But that's actually coming fall of 2019 for the PlayStation 4. Moving on, The Princess Guide is coming March 26, 2019, so a little later on this month. That's for the PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo Switch. Lapis Labyrinth is coming out March 28th, so a few days after that, for the PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo Switch. And then moving on, Alliance Alive HD Remastered, which is one that a lot of people have pointed out that looks pretty cool. That one's actually the PlayStation 4, Switch, and Steam. That's fall 2019. The Caligula Effect Overdose is actually out today. That's for the PlayStation 4, Switch, Steam, GOG. That's March 12th today. You can go pick that one up. And then moving on from there, RPG Maker MV that I kind of said was canceled for the Xbox One. It is still coming out PS4 and Switch. It just still says coming 2019. It's already out in Japan. It actually came out at the end of 2018 in Japan, so that's already available. I assume they're just spending time localizing it because I'm sure there's an obscene amount of text and stuff to work through and all the connectivity for creating RPGs and then sharing them online with people. But that's coming still 2019 for the PlayStation 4 and the Switch. Neo Atlas 1469, April 9th, 2019. That is for the Switch, an actual physical edition as well. And then SNK 40th Anniversary Collection. That's already available on the Switch, but it's also going to be available March 19th on the PlayStation 4. And then moving on from there, we have a name that I probably cannot pronounce, but it's Prelude to the Fallen. Before that is a very long word that looks very difficult to pronounce. That's PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, digital only, and that's early 2020. So keep in mind, they're actually keeping the Vita alive at least into 2020 with Prelude to the Fallen still coming out, digital only, of course, on the Vita. So good job to NIS keeping the Vita alive, probably longer than it should be at this point. Longer than Sony cares for it to be. Destiny Connect is like the big game that they had talked about previously, and that is coming fall 2019, PlayStation 4 and the Switch, which for a lot of people caught some people off guard. That might be sooner than people were thinking, since we actually heard about this game for the first time, like a month or two ago? So there you go. It is at least being localized and brought over the fall 2019 this year. So NIS America had a pretty good showing, I think. It wasn't anything crazy. Like, they didn't show up with like a Disgaea or something, right? But they had a lot of content there for people who enjoy their type of games that they localize and bring over, and to have different things like Destiny Connect, for example, showing up a bit sooner. RPG Maker MV is the one that's throwing me off because that's already in Japan, and I guess just the localizing it, the efforts for that are more than they maybe thought, because it's going to be coming out a bit well after it came out in Japan, and that seems like a bigger game for them to put out on the Switch and the PlayStation 4, but definitely the Switch. It's very telling that they canceled it on the Xbox, and it's still not even ready for the Switch and the PS4, but overall, pretty good. A lot of games coming out soon, actually, this month even, with the Caligula Effect coming out today, so pretty cool to see. Overall, if you're a NIS fan, I think you were happy, but you have to look forward, I guess, towards the end of the year to see if we get anything with a Disgaea announcement or anything. Next up, let's talk about Microsoft's big studio. It's the one that they've created pretty much from the ground up. It's the Initiative. It's head by Daryl Gallagher, who's actually with a bunch of different companies, including Activision, Crystal Dynamics, Square Enix. So he's been around the block a few times, and they're creating the Initiative, and that's Microsoft's a big AAA studio. They're working on something. I don't really know what. I'd like to think it's something like Perfect Dark, or maybe they're making their own IP. Anyway, they've been kind of a mysterious, kind of faceless, I guess, company or studio at this point, but they did put out a full trailer, I guess you'd say, for their studio, kind of introducing themselves, and this is a pretty good trailer, to be honest. Pretty good video talking about what they want to do, which seems to be breaking from the norm. I will admit, there is a lot of pressure on the initiative. They are hiring people from all over. They're in Santa Monica, and they're hiring people from like the Naughty Dog team who've worked there, for example. People have worked on God of War, Red Dead Redemption, the Tomb Raider, Rise of the Tomb Raider, though. But they've been all over the place hiring big-time talent. So I feel like the initiative is going to come out of the gate with an insanely expensive but good game, hopefully. The way they're talking, though, it sounds like they don't want to do, I guess, what we've seen a lot of, which maybe is more of that slower-paced cinematic style. Maybe they want to do something a bit different and crazier. I don't know, because if they pick up an IP that we know of, like a Perfect Dark, how much can you do to Perfect Dark to make it that different from being just a shooter? It's hard to say, but they have the talent, they have the budget. Like, I mean, Microsoft is there backing them, and they don't want them to create something that's going to flop and get a 70, right? I see them taking their time. I don't think we're going to hear from the initiative about their game until next generation, so it'll probably be like 2 years. Like, it'll probably be E3 2021 that we actually see the initiative's game, just because I think it's going to be in the oven for a while cooking. It's going to be a bit. So it'll be cool, though, because that's a game that should come out and be able to compete with what Sony is doing. And also, of course, it'll go to Game Pass. It'll be on PC. It'll pretty much be anywhere they can put it. The xCloud with your phone. So you probably have a way to play this game, even if you don't right now. You'll probably be able to play it on a bunch of different platforms by the time it comes out. Either way, it was a cool video to see. Cool to finally put some faces, I guess, to the name, the initiative, and we'll see what they come up with. Next up, let's talk about Valve, because they are apparently back in the business of making games. At least that's what they want us to think. See, Valve announced to the world that they are going to be making games again, and then they announced Artifact. And people were, of course, thinking, oh, cool, Half-Life 3, or maybe the next Team Fortress, or the next Dota or something. And then they come out and they say Artifact. People say, well, what is that? Oh, it's a digital card game. Okay, I guess. And it comes out, it was a game you had to buy. It wasn't like a free-to-play game, which threw some people then, because then, of course, buying cards had to do with real money. And then they said they wouldn't change cards, but some cards came out overpowered, so then they changed them. And they dropped heavily in concurrent player count from, tens of thousands of people playing down to a couple hundred now. And now it looks like it is on, it's on life support right now. There's an issue, and this game is just flat out in trouble. And I don't know what Valve's going to do about it, because at this point they've even parted ways with the person they brought in the first place to make this all work, and that's the Magic the Gathering designer. Actually was pretty much terminated in terms of their contract, Richard Garfield. He's now left Valve, and he actually said that it had to do with the rocky launch of the game. And it's a shame to see this, because this is supposed to be Valve's getting back into the game business, and of course they apparently are just having an issue with it. And that figures, because a lot of people wanted something other than Artifact, and it didn't seem to work out that well, and now it's kind of, where do they go from here? I don't know. I guess Artifact just keeps getting supported, although apparently they haven't updated since the end of January. So I don't know what's going to happen with this game. If you've invested a lot of money into it, it probably doesn't feel great that they got rid of the designer of the game from Magic the Gathering, because it feels like at this point they don't even know what to do, right? At this point they have no leadership or anything with it, so hard to say. I don't think it's just going to go away completely, but if people aren't playing it, what's the point of Artifact being a thing? And then our last bit of news, let's talk about Zelda Breath of the Wild, because it is probably, I think anyway, probably one of the best looking games on the Switch. I think the art style and direction of it is great, and I think it works really well whether it's on a TV or the tablet, the handheld mode. But what if it didn't have those cel-shaded visuals? How would the game look? Well, it'd look weird, because as you're seeing here, there's a video that was put out by Arc Longstride, and this is actually done in Cemu, which is the emulator that was developed for the Wii U for the PC, and it allows people to do all kinds of modifications and stuff to it, whether it's putting it up to 4K, 60 frames per second, all kinds of stuff. And in this modification, they removed the cel shading kind of visuals to it, and they also removed the fog and stuff in the distance so you can see very far off, and the cel shading is off of everything around you as well. And it looks generic. It doesn't look eye-catching like it does with the cel shading effects, and I guess it makes sense why they went the direction they did, because the Switch is only capable of so much, but a good art style will always really make up for any kind of power differences, if that makes sense. If you have a good looking game, just from an art direction, usually you can get away with a lot. And we've seen it before, like Metroid Prime, for example. Like Retro Studios got a lot out of Metroid Prime back on the GameCube, to the point now where you go back and look at it, it still looks really good, especially if you have like an HDMI adapter for the GameCube, or if you're playing it on your Wii through component cables. It still holds up now, and a lot of that had to do with the art style and the direction they went in with it. So it's one of the reasons I'm excited for Metroid Prime 4 now that Retro Studios is behind that game. But back to Zelda Breath of the Wild, they managed to get it up to 60 frames per second, and yeah, maybe leave the cell shading on, because it's, even with it like all smoothed out and upscaled and everything to a higher resolution, it still doesn't look great. The cell shading really helped out that game. It really gave it the emotion and everything, and I know there are people who didn't like the direction of it, but I think it looks great, and I think the majority of people do. But even back in the day with Wind Waker, we had to deal with it where people weren't happy with that direction, the art style. But the game was fantastic, got Game of the Year like pretty much across the board, and it's still, I think, probably the best game on the Switch still. So let me know what you guys think about how it looks without the cell shading. I think they should probably leave it on. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit the like button. Really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. And make sure you're also subscribed here, as we do this every weekday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, so you can stop by and get caught up on all the news that you might have missed from the day before. Let me know what you think about Zelda Breath of the Wild and the cell shading being removed, or Artifact with Valve. Do you think they should throw in the towel on that? Maybe work on something a bit bigger? Maybe Half-Life 3. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.